Welcome back to Leading Blind again, and this is my recap of my last 2 sessions of my home campaign that I am partaking in called the Strix, loosely based on the Strixhaven campaign manual. My husband is the DM, my brother-in-law, and now my sister-in-law are part of this campaign as well. My brother-in-law and I are both playing 2 characters, and my husband is also playing a DMPC. Anybody who comes across this will already know that, and some of you who come across this will be like, wait, the last 2 sessions? Yes, I've noticed I've had a hard time finding the last barely give a fuck recap I did of my second to last session, but I was in such a bad mental state, exhausted and fed up with my computer and other such things at that time, that I decided when I do the recap of my newest session, I am also going to redo a recap of the one that came before it, so everybody can be more thoroughly brought up to date. So let's get this started. So session 5 started the morning after the group had gone out to have some party time together. Keithar had discovered Opani's mistake of the evening or 2 before, when she had lashed out in a moment of irrational anger and accidentally killed another student before immediately bringing them back with her healing powers. And Kita had decided that she was going to stay with Opani at her dorm for the night in order to make sure she didn't do something stupid in her agitated state. Because obviously at this point, Opani doesn't know what's going to happen to her because her new security guard friend knows that she killed somebody. So, that is where we left off, and we start the next morning in the head security office of the college campus in general, and we spend quite a bit of time here at first. The very first thing that happens is the group is introduced to my sister-in-law's character, since my sister-in-law, who many people on this channel have already seen on screen, is playing a fire genasi named Celeste. And Celeste is big. She's obviously made of fire. She's mostly made of blue fire, except for her hair. And she wears a lot of armor that basically makes you think of fire. Like, it flickers with the colors in her body and other flame colors. And it just looks like it's partially made of solid flame. Her body herself, she says, looks almost rather translucent and loose in flame, but because she's a barbarian character, rather like Keithar, she goes into rages and the flames condense into a more solid form, which I thought was really, really cool. She is also a student at the school in Prismari, so the same school as Kita, and she is also a security officer, just like Keithar. But Keithar tends to be stationed at the gladiatorial stadium, whereas Celeste is often put in her own school campus of Prismari. So they have seen each other, but they have never formally met in any capacity. So we start with Celeste in the security hub, bringing a drunken disorderly to cool off in one of the cells in the campus station. Right behind her, as she's dealing with that, walk in Keithar with Jiri. Both of them look like they've had a fun little morning so far, even though it's very early. Their hair is kind of braided into strands, and even Keithar has like a couple barrette clips in his hair, so it's clear he's let his sister give him like a little fun makeover. He's in very casual clothing, and he is there to ask the front desk about Kita's background, because when Kita first told him about how she had several sisters that she was going to kill, it came across to him at that time that this was some sort of bloodthirsty woman who wanted to commit, family annihilation. But he wants to make sure, okay, she also says she's a princess of a faraway kingdom, so is this just politics and I don't have to be worried about that? Or should I be still concerned, and should I have my sister around this person? He also wants to check on whether or not there have been any complaints about a drow killing or just generally attacking another, possibly most likely male student, who then was allowed to leave afterwards, brought back to life, healed, whatever, however they might have put it, in a certain area of campus. In other words, the cavern that Opani was in or beside when she made this attack. It turns out that the person at the front desk is willing to do the background check for Keithar, even if it isn't completely on the up and up, but he says he probably doesn't have to worry about Kita because it is politics related. Unless she does something on campus, don't worry about it. And then he looks up any complaints about a student attacking another in the situation that Keithar describes, and there is nothing. So Keithar sighs in relief and goes, okay, my friend did something fucked up, I gotta keep an eye on her, but she's in the clear. If this person hasn't made a complaint yet, they probably are not going to. And I'm not going to bring her in based on, the fact that she made a fuck up and then fixed it as soon as possible and is clearly very remorseful. So, that is the beginning of that part, but when he turns around, he realizes that Jiri has gone missing. Frustrated that his baby sister has managed to sneak off yet again, as this is a normal routine for him, he racks his brain to figure out, okay, where would she have gone and why would she have left in the first place? I am in the middle of this campus. I don't think I need to be as paranoid as I would be if I were back home, because he does have very distinct reasons for being overprotective of his sister. He realizes, oh, we just passed a fire genasi walking in. I don't think she's ever seen a fire genasi up close. Yes, there are others on campus, but she's never encountered one before. I gotta find where that fire genasi went. So he rushes out and he starts trying to find his sister's trail. At this point in time, Celeste, who had left the building and planned to return to Prismari to finish her shift, did sense somebody following her, and when she saw it was an unattended cub, basically, she stopped and waited to see what would happen. So this makes it possible for Keithar to come up to her and ask her if she had seen an unattended little girl that was, a lion. Celeste says yes and points directly to Jiri, who had, up to that point, completely been hiding from him. Keithar scolds her for taking off, even though he knows she can take care of herself on some level. And then he says, okay, now that I'm actually here, and now that she's actually with us and she knows you exist, would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like to ask some questions? And they do. A little shyly, Jiri asks Celeste about about what she is and about who she is, where she is in the school, what she's interested in. Kind of interrogates her just as a person in the way little kids do. And then she offers Celeste and her brother something she tore off of a bulletin board in the security center that is advertising a trivia night at the Fire Jolt Cafe, which Keithar recognizes as the biggest, most popular dive, like coffee bar dive, on the campus in the central hub by the Biblioplex and by this security building. They talk about it for a minute, thinking, hey, maybe the rest of our friends would like to go to this. What do you think? And then Keithar turns to Celeste and offhandedly says, well, you could join us too if you were going to go and you didn't want to go by yourself. We'll be there. And she says she'll think about it, and they part ways. Celeste back to Prismari, and Keithar and Jiri to the Biblioplex. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last actual full recap or not, but Gowan had talked about looking through some classified ads to try and find a way to earn some extra cash, since everybody already knows he can't really afford new armor and new weapons, and he's quite old and his equipment is ancient. So now that Keithar, Celeste, and Jiri have left the security hub office, a little while later walks in Gowan, who had found a classified ad looking for some extra help in that department. So he approaches the front desks and he shows them the ad and he says, I am here at your service. What can I do for you? And they are hiring some extra lackadaisical security because of what happened at the Biblioplex. And Gowan talks about how he was there, how it was really weird. And they go, yeah, okay, sure. Clearly they're not too, worried about who they're hiring. This guy seems to need the money. So they hire him and they assign him the Biblioplex. And they say, when do you want to start working? And Gowan's like, I don't have classes today. Now, right now. So they give him his assignment and off he goes to the Biblioplex. Across campus in the Witherbloom section, Kita wakes up in Opani's apartment on her couch and begins preparing a lavish breakfast and coffee for herself and her friend with whatever is available in the dorm room. Opani wakes up a little bit embarrassed because, she felt rather babysat the previous night by Kita, and she's annoyed that her friend is treating her like a ticking time bomb. And basically, since Kita is very overbearing and won't even let her check her schedule for the day at that point in time until she's had some coffee and food. So Kita's playing keep away with Opani's schedule until Opani just goes, fine, whatever the fuck gets me my schedule. And she has a coffee and has something to eat, and they kind of bitch at each other playfully for a little bit. And after they do that, they realize, hey, there's not much going on today for either one of them. Kita decides she's still worried about Opani, so they both need to do some studying, so they'll just study together. Why not, She's not, gonna be crazy about her protectiveness of Opani, but she's like, just let me hang out with you a little bit longer in case there's some kind of fallout, And so they are going to go to the Biblioplex now, and they're going to study, They got different things to research. I will say at this point in time, after this session, my brother-in-law, who's playing Kita, did ask me, the way Opani's reacting to Kita is not how I'm trying to make Kita seem. So Kita's probably trying to be, friendlier and less overbearing, but in the beginning, while he was still trying to find Kita's footing a little bit, she came across more as a I get my way spoiled brat bitch, but that's apparently not who Kita is. So we'll be seeing a change in that when we get to summarizing next session a little bit. But sometimes you don't realize how you come across, and I was fine with it. I was like, hey, Kita can be this way. Opani still likes her. We then decided to time jump up ahead to the time when the entire group was supposed to meet together in front of the Fire Jolt Cafe for the trivia event night. This cafe is quite large, quite busy. It's extremely popular. The events are very well known there. And Keith has been there many, many times to get himself a coffee. And as they all enter, a couple of people go up to the barista behind the bar, who is being aided by a metal automaton, and order things for the group. And they ask if they could please push together some of the tables because they have a group about 6 or 7 people and they'd like to sit very close together. The iron automaton goes to group a bunch of these tables together for them, and they sit kind of in the front right corner of this cafe. Keithar actually recognizes the barista as the same silver-haired elven or half-elven lady who was working at the Biblioplex Cafe on the day they first met together, his group. So that's an interesting little side note. And then they all settle down, and for the trivia night, my husband simply decided to have us answer Disney trivia questions to make it quicker and easier. We're all big Disney buffs, and that was fun. It doesn't matter. Did they win? Did they lose? They're in the middle of this trivia night, having fun. And all of a sudden, through the doors, the windows, and the walls, burst 3 giant stone golems with blue stones glowing in their chests. Multiple massive, gargantuan-sized frogs that are probably the size of VW bugs, and a few other smaller creatures, if I'm not mistaken, but I will have to check that. At the very least, these things are big, they are fierce and they are a little scary. And the group rolls initiative for the second time this campaign. This invasion, of course, caused us instant pandemonium, and you would think that this being a school for arcane and fighters would actually have students that decide to fight something and get a little practical practice in. But no, everybody that can start fleeing immediately tries to get the fuck out of there. The only people who deliberately stay and fight without trying to leave in the process of it are our group of heroes, the silver-haired girl, and the iron automaton that works behind the bar. Immediately, about 9 standby citizens end up getting eaten by these giant frogs, while Jiri jumps onto one of the group together tables to start taking aim with her little crossbow, and Keithar launches himself straight over it in a very cold, still rage in order to launch himself towards one of the golems. Unfortunately, I do believe he ends up encountering a giant frog first, and that is where he stays for the rest of the session. Celeste is the hero of this session because it soon comes to their realization that these stone golems with the blue gems in their chest, they are not outright attacking people. They are slamming themselves in a pattern through the walls, and if they don't stop them, they will bring the roof of this building down on everybody left inside. So Celeste flies into her own personal rage. Her flames condense and tighten inside of her armor, and she pretty quickly dispatches all 3 of these stone golems on her own with minimal assistance from the others. Even Keithar, who gets stuck trying to attack this giant frog in front of him because it was the nearest enemy, ends up constantly missing him, getting grappled by him, and then getting so pissed off at his complete inadequacy in his latest fights, takes out his harpoon and just thrusts it down into this creature as hard as he can. By this point in time, Gowan has finished with 2 or 3 giant frogs and come over to assist him, sees Keithar finally dispatching the thing, and just asks him, "You feel better yet?" And Keithar looks at him disgruntled and goes, "Marginally," before they both turn into their own separate enemies again at that point. Kita is flinging spells around, and I'll be honest, I don't remember how much damage she succeeds in doing. I manage to lose track of Kita all the time, and I don't know if it's because she's a spell slinger, so she's not one-on-one with things a lot, but she was definitely doing some serious damage in her own way. She just didn't have the same kind of power as Gowan or Celeste. And Opani is fighting a couple of frogs herself, and when she sees 3 pedestrians getting eaten all at once by these 2 giant frogs, she flies into a dark rage of her own. Not like a barbarian rage, but she is pissed that she saw these people get hurt, and there is nothing she can do about it. She can't even get close enough to help these people because the frogs are in her way. Not that there's really anything left because they're inside these frogs' bodies. So she, filled with this anger, lashes out with, I believe it is her Chaos Bolt, and she eliminates 1 or 2 of these things. And that voice of her mother comes into her head again, warning her against that power, which just irritates her all the more. Close to her side, also fighting these giant frogs, is the silver-haired barista who Opani notices for the first time as this badass silver-haired bitch with this golden skin fights off these enemies that are attacking her property. And Opani gets just a little bit thirsty. But by the time the fight ends, many of the walls are damaged. There is no help from anyone outside of this bar, and they are left breathless. They begin examining the bodies of their enemies that have been left behind, and they find more kit coins. They find the same black goo that is residue in the last fighting scene, and they find a strange parchment that looks similar to the one that probably summoned creatures to the last battle. Gawain, finding out from Keithar that these stone golems, are from Lore Hall School. These things help in such things as digging up old ruins or doing labor. They need to be controlled by something, realizes there's nobody controlling these things inside, so he goes out the front door, and the session ends with Gawain seeing a cloaked figure booking it down the block, around the corner, and down a side alley.
Gawain, at the beginning of the next session, quickly turns to his comrades inside the Fire Jolt Cafe and tells them that he sees somebody fleeing the scene. Keithar takes a moment to ask the silver-haired barkeep to contact security and inform them of what's been going on. She assures him that she'll get to that, and the group agree to head off in pursuit of this mysterious cloaked figure. It becomes very apparent very quickly that they will not be able to track and catch up to this person with how far behind they are, and Keithar assigns Jiri the very important task of moving on ahead because she can make herself faster than anyone else in the group, and to figure out where this person is going or who they are. Not to engage in them on her own, although he trusts she's capable of at least handling herself, but just to make sure she doesn't walk into a situation that puts her in over her head. So Jiri casts, I believe it's essentially haste and leap on herself, but whatever it was 2 spells that will let her just move like 160 feet per turn, essentially. And then she also casts one of those 2 spells on Gawain because it is a good idea for somebody that's already really fast moving to be able to sort of keep up with her and be there quickly for backup if shit breaks out. The last thing she does is cast Disguise on herself to look like a patron she'd noticed at the Fire Jolt Cafe that night, so she is less discernible as one of the members that was fighting in the most recent battle. So she tears off like the Roadrunner from Looney Tunes, and Gawain follows as closely behind as he can, although with her sneaky skills, she very quickly vanishes into the shadows like a puff of smoke, and he has to try to track her in any way he possibly can. Along the way, he realizes, Jiri has not cast the same spell on the rest of my party. I'm out here on my own trying to hunt her down, essentially. So he stops twice to light torches and leave them as a guide. The rest of the group follow much more slowly behind, but they do manage to track them, no thanks to Keithar, who keeps rolling really shit on his perception and survival skills, and almost guides the group in the entirely wrong direction. Kida and Celeste, however, are a little bit better at the whole thing as Opani just follows behind, trusting whoever feels the most confident in where they're going. Jiri, well ahead of the group, finally gets a mysterious cloaked figure in her sight, and having seen no one else, assumes this must be the person Gawain was speaking of. She places Hunter's Mark on them, and then waits in the shadows for her party to arrive. Gawain is, of course, the first to show up, so she reveals herself to him and explains what happened, and he commends her for her self-discipline and her abilities by addressing her as a young huntress, which is, in his mind, a title of deep respect and marking her as an equal. A short time later, the rest of the group arrive a little bit winded, and when Jiri points out where she can feel her quarry lurking, Keithar recognizes the first establishment the group ever went to together to enjoy some ice cream and get to know each other, which was the Bows End Tavern, and his stomach drops into his feet as he realizes there is going to likely be another attack. he quickly instructs his little sister to do what she's already done, but this time she has to get to whoever's in charge of that tavern, or the first person in the worst case scenario that she can recognize as working there, and warn them to clear out the building and to get ready for a scene. And as Juri runs off to do that, the others follow in hot pursuit, Gawain this time choosing to stick a little bit closer to his friends so they at least keep him in sight. Jiri rushes into the tavern, although it is at the back left hand of the establishment, and makes her way around until she can find a door into the front room. She sidetracks herself a little bit, looking into different rooms, trying to find staff, trying to find the front, because she doesn't know the establishment well enough to find her way easily through it. Until finally she's in the front room. She can feel her quarry in the exact same room as her, and she visually marks them as she heads to the bar to find an enormous devil with red skin and leathery wings and massive horns behind the bar, dealing with the patrons. Everybody ready to get really, really confused? I'm probably going to confuse myself here as things start to dive into a rolling for initiative, because I'm legally blind. I literally could not see the map and could only vaguely make sense of where anybody was until over halfway through, when I finally understood front room, back room, side room, and that's all I understood. It took until the last hour and a half of the fight to understand alleyway outside. So not only that, my husband today, as I was trying to make sense of what happened with him, he said, well, when I translated the map from page to dry erase board, I did misinterpret a couple of things on the map, and I also slightly altered a couple of things on the map. So using the Dungeons & Dragons Bows End Tavern map, I'm going to do my best to translate to you where everyone was and what happened. So at this point in time, Jiri's in the front barroom with the devil. Gawain is in the middle dining area to the right. Kita is in the middle hallway-ish area. And Celeste is in the party room at the very middle back. Kithar is to the left in the dining middle area, and Opani has just made it between the storage area and the same dining area that Kithar is in, so she's kind of between the doors to the party room and the storage area as shit starts to hit the fan. As Jiri is trying to wave down the devil bartender to get his attention, imps suddenly burst into the main bar room behind Jiri towards the front right hand of the dining area. People start screaming and scattering, and Jiri finally gets the bartender's attention as he looks over her shoulder, since she is still disguised, to see the imps, and she tells him, something bad just happened at the Fire Jolt Cafe. It's gonna happen here. They tried to take the building down. People died. We gotta get people out of here. The devil nods, raises up into the air, and in a big, commanding, booming voice tells his patrons, the bar is closed, it is time to leave. And everybody he targets who fails a saving throw against him starts to immediately flee in fear, because it is much more of a fear thing than a command. As Kithar hears the first screams from the imps, he realizes his sister has probably made it to the front room, and he needs to get there to give her a little backup just in case she needs it, and to protect any patrons in the front. He knows that he would have to go all the way around to the other side of the building to get through a door that leads into the front room. So he decides to take a shortcut, a la the Cowardly Lion after meeting the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. He dives headfirst through the nearest window, runs a few feet along the outer wall, and then dives headfirst again through a second window that leads him into the bar and hops up to his feet after a rolling stop. He does not immediately peg his sister, but he does, after a moment, recognize her bow and the person that she disguised herself as when she takes a turn and fires at the person she hunters marked. The cloaked figure that was shot at angrily casts a spell back at Jiri and hits her. Jiri ducks down behind the middle of the bar where the devil is hovering over and drops the disguise so she can't more easily be recognized by this cloaked figure as the person that shot them. Going into his first hot rage, Keithar lunges at the person, swipes at them, grabs them, and screams into their faces in a roar, "Don't touch my fucking sister." The cloaked figure turns and Keithar recognizes, or doesn't really recognize, but thinks he sort of might recognize these strange features of a feminine type figure under this hooded cloak that spits at him, "What sister?" Because obviously, Jiri was disguised as a dude from the Fire Jolt Cafe who was there a little bit ago. At this point in time, the entire group feels a wash of energy come over them, and the magic users recognize this as something pegging them for what they are. That something out there knows that they're magic users. And also, simultaneously, 3 fire elementals come into the bar from different advantage points. One comes through the front left of the main tavern building. One comes through the wall near where Opani is, and Keithar had just been, and another comes through the very back wall into the party room where Celeste is. Shortly thereafter, as things are starting to attack and fight, a monstrosity of nightmare-inducing fuel comes to the back right storage area of the tavern to face Gawain, and it is this nasty scorpion thing with enormous giant teeth and a tail and praying mantis-like limbs, and it's this thing, although the characters don't really recognize it right away, except for a little tickle in the back of a couple of their heads, as in, like, I've seen the shape of this thing somewhere before, but where? Is a mage hunter. Celeste, alone and face-to-face with this giant fire elemental, begins to try to fight it. And around this time, a drunk patron of the tavern, along with a couple of his buddies who had been sleeping on tables in the party room, wake up and they realize the bar is under attack. They hear all the screaming, but they can't differentiate Celeste as a fire genasi from the fire elemental. So not knowing who is doing the defending and who doing is the attacking, just instinctively and drunkenly start taking swing attacks at Celeste. Luckily, none of them hit her, none of them damage her, and she just kind of dodges them and ignores them because she, as a security guard, just goes, "Yeah, these assholes are drunk. I'm not going to waste my time with their ineffectual bullshit." And she keeps her attention on the fire elemental. Jiri turns her attention between the front room fire elemental and the imps as the imps start attacking escaping patrons, and the fire elemental heads towards the back wall, completely ignoring anyone who is around it, not trying to attack anyone. So with this same behavior happening to the 2 other fire elementals, everybody realizes it's gonna happen again. These things want to take down the building. They're just not stone golems this time. So everyone, except for Jiri, concentrates a lot harder on specifically the fire elementals, so that way they can't burn the building down. However, the elemental that Celeste is fighting does manage to start burning down the wall in the middle of the tavern between the front barroom and the back hallway between the barroom and the party room. Gawain goes into combat with the mage hunter and realizes very, very quickly that if he uses magic on it, it locks onto him hard fucking core and goes into prepare attacks. On the other side of the tavern, Opani is faced with the 3rd fire elemental, and a last patron of the bar who seems more sober and a little bit more capable goes into combat with her, although she cannot get very good point of view or help too much at first, as she is preparing to help the centaur fight this fire elemental. The centaur takes a few blows that are too hard and falls. This pisses Opani off, and she casts one of her not necromantic but damaging spells at the fire elemental so she can get to the centaur and bring him back before it's too late if possible. And the voices start in her head again, only this time it's not her mother telling her about power and how dangerously subtle it is. It is a brand new voice that is silky and smooth and seductive, and it tells her, you can do better than that, and we both know it. And freaked the fuck out, and also pissed off that she has not managed to do very much yet, casts Chaotic Bolt at the fire elemental, wiping it out completely before she is able to get to the centaur and cast Spare the Dying, because she does not have time or energy to bring him back up just yet. Once Opani has managed to eliminate the fire elemental and cast her Spare the Dying spell on the centaur, the voice comes into her head again and says, "See? Isn't that better?" In the front room at this time, the devil has turned his attention to the imps, and he manages to cast a spell on them so he takes control, making them completely a non-threat for the rest of the fight. And at this time, there is a fire on that back wall of the bar, making an enormous hole between the two kind of bigger rooms of the bar, or at least the two front areas. And he sees that Gowan is fighting that mage hunter, and with rage in his eyes goes to assist a by then quite badly wounded Gowan, because this thing does some serious fucking damage in very, very little time with pretty little fucking effort. Kita sees that Celeste is fighting the other fire elemental, helps her and also Gowan with her magic, also noticing that this thing is locking onto her whenever she casts magic, and manages to, thirdly, put out the fire that has consumed the middle supportive wall of this building, taking away any further danger that might collapse the roof on their heads. In the front room, Keithar and Jiri manage to take down the last fire elemental with a little assistance from the devil before he takes off, and he moves past the, by this point in time, apparently non-threatening cloaked figure, bugged that they seem familiar but he can't place why, passes his sister and goes to help Kita, Gowan, and the devil with the mage hunter. Celeste is also on her way to help, while Opani is trying to figure out that anything else is even going on. And not knowing the layout of the building, she opts to head back out the way she came so she can walk along the back wall towards the other entrance she saw while coming in, to try and get closer to all those violent noises she's been hearing. But as she steps out into the alleyway and towards the other door, she sees the back end of the mage hunter and casts a spell at it. The mage hunter locks onto her, and Opani quickly backpedals, hopefully out of its range, to save her own ass a little bit, because she knows this thing might be gunning for her. Keithar, who has made his way into the middle area where Kita is, casting spells at the mage hunter from a distance, he suddenly realizes why the cloaked female figure seems so familiar. And he looks at Kita and says, "Do you have a twin?" At which point Kita notices the cloaked figure, sees the face underneath, and grows very pale and starts shaking. Keithar, remembering what Kita had said about how she would kill her sisters if necessary, and how her sisters would do the exact same thing to her in order to gain power of their father's throne, puts two and two together, and turns to his sister who is following behind him and says, "We need to watch our friends back." and they stand between the mage hunter so they can do some distant damage to it, and also to be on the defensive against the thing at their backs that they now recognize as one of Kita's sisters. But her sister decides to cut and run because apparently things are not going according to plan. This is not the right time to do this, and she takes off. Jiri tries to take off after her since she's hunters marked this cloaked woman, but her brother grabs her and commands her to stay. There is not a good time for this, and at first Jiri is very reticent to listen and just has like prey and a target in her mind, kind of like the Terminator. But Kithar points out, look at her friend. And he makes Jiri look at Kita and see how on edge and scared she is. And he says, you can't face that thing alone. Whatever she is, whoever she is, you can't go do that on your own. I don't want you doing that. We don't know what we're facing. We're having enough trouble right here as it is. There will be another time. So Jiri begrudgingly stays, growing very sullen and quiet and depressed as everybody turns back to the mage hunter, and a few more blows are given to it before it decides also that it is too fucking damaged to face off against this big of a group of things or people, and cuts and runs itself. It is around this time, as things calm down and the imps are banished by the devil to some other dimension, that the group realizes and communicates with those who haven't realized it what the mage hunter is. The fact that it is a mage hunter, and the fact that they have seen millions of these things. Not necessarily in person walking around, but as statues, as etchings, as photos. They are all over the fucking campus. And the devil tells them, yeah, you've seen them. Those things are real, and they are here to hunt down rogue mages when they start to hurt people. There is then a long debate, discussion, and out loud wonderings as the group explains to Opani, Celeste, and Gawain what just happened with Kita's sister, and they also try to impress upon Jiri why she couldn't go chasing her. Kita seems to feel like she has to have a stiff upper lip and block everybody out and separate herself, but the group will not let her leave. They will not let her go after her sister on her own. They will not let her be on her own. Especially Opani, who's like, look, you helped me last night, even though I didn't want your help. You're going to have to deal with that being reciprocated. I am not going to let you put yourself in danger or be alone in a situation where you could end up hurting yourself in the long run. Gawain is mostly quiet, and Kithar also tries to impress upon Kita, look, I understand what it's like to be afraid of your siblings. There's a reason I left home, and there was a reason I took my sister with me. And although he tries to be quiet so as not to involve his sister directly in the conversation, he's not necessarily trying to keep her completely ignorant. He is clearly just trying to put things in a way that doesn't terrify his sister and make her afraid of her own family, because he says, look, I have one brother who maybe her full sibling, because most of us are probably half siblings, and he's a little off, and I get a bad vibe from him, and I think that because I think they're full siblings and he thinks they're full siblings, there is an heir apparent rivalry going on, and I worry that he is at least capable, if not necessarily motivated, to come after her, and I had to simply remove her from the situation for out of sight and out of mind. And you are not fucking alone anymore. Kita responds to him, but you don't trust me. You think I'm dangerous. And he says, I thought there was a chance you could be, and I was going to protect my sister from that. I did not think you were going to hurt me or any of these other people. I just want to make sure my sister wasn't going to end up in a situation like the one we now find ourselves in, because I thought some of the danger could be from you if you flipped. I realize what's going on now. I'm not worried about you hurting my sister, But if she and I are here voluntarily and she gets hurt, that's a completely different situation than somebody we trusted just turning on us. So get used to it, because now you have friends, now you are not on your own, and you don't have to be so scared. At this point, the bartender devil is telling them about how he is pissed off that this mage hunter and these other things came into his fucking establishment. How they dared to come into his fucking establishment and attack his fucking patrons. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not completely cognizant of what all of this means. I'm not smart enough to understand it, honestly. But he basically talks about, hey, these mage hunters, they attack rogue mages. There was no rogue mage in here slinging spells around, as far as I could tell, harming people, until after those imps and fire elementals rolled in and you guys started fighting them to protect people. So whatever's going on here, whatever's controlling the mage hunters, whatever's controlling those those stone golems from the other place you told me about, they have to be really high up on the pole. They have to be something like dean of students level of superiority in the network of the campus politics. And you guys, you need to solve this, because I can't leave my bar, and I won't. And he lines up a round of shots for them. And Keithar tentatively tries to ask him, what are these? I trust you. I just want to know what I'm putting in my body. But Gowan just walks over and he chugs the shot. Turns out these were an elixir that basically is the equivalent of a long rest. He gets all his hit points back. He gets all his spell slots and actions back. And thank God for that, because I found out from my brother-in-law a couple of days later, he was down to 3 hit points when the battle was over. So he got fucked up. The rest of the group quickly follow behind and take all their shots. Keithar, of course, making sure his sister gets hers before he takes his. And the devil tells them, you are all acting accordance with what I tell you to do. I am a high enough level in the webworks of this campus for me to have the authority to deputize you, essentially. Go and find out what the fuck is happening and stop it. And although Opani is vastly confused, because she honestly doesn't understand anything that's going on beyond the fact that her new friend is in danger from her sister and is not going to let anything happen to her, she heads out with everybody, and they determine that somehow or other they are going to solve this problem. Because obviously, they can't count on security or other people in the system to really do it. There is one thing Opani also knows and understands. A couple of nights ago, she went rogue and she flat out murdered somebody. Granted, she fixed the problem and brought them back herself, and she was very repentant, but she did murder somebody with magic. So why didn't any mage hunters come over her at that point in time? Was she not slinging around strong and dangerous enough magic to trigger one of these things to come after her? She just doesn't know and doesn't understand that. And that is the end of the session. I hope everybody enjoyed the recap. I hope it was sensical to some level, because there are things I left out here and there, such as the devil trying to command the mage hunter to be gone, and it just rolling off of that thing like oil off of a duck's back, or water off of a duck's back, whatever the saying is. But they were small beans actions or interactions enough that I didn't think of them in order properly to put them in, or just to not include them at all. My brother-in-law has a theory that Kita's sister was the one that summoned the imps and was trying to get to her sister, but I have no idea whether that theory holds any water or not, and I'm not going to use it in-game, obviously. And I think there were a couple of other theories going around here or there, and I know I missed things. I've had a hard time saying what Celeste does, because Celeste basically walks around and hits things. She doesn't talk much, mostly because my sister-in-law doesn't talk much. She's a very quiet person. And she doesn't do a ton of things unless she's instructed to, mostly because my sister-in-law is still getting used to the game, so having somebody tell her what she should or could do helps her a lot so far. Hopefully that will change. We'll see. Maybe Celeste is just a very quiet person like my sister-in-law is. But Celeste was there. She was helping. She was part of the conversation, if, very quietly so. And the marathon of action will continue next time.